Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe. I'm quoting the Big C and them good old boys from down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course you good old boys in Canada. You know we love you in Canada, but there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I'm flying solo today. Big C is out traveling around in the south, and I want to say today is a beautiful January 15th, 2018, in the land of the free, the home of the brave. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and a holiday that we really want to just say I give my thanks to what Dr. King stood for, and how his whole goal was how to create racial equality and social and racial justice and economic justice. It wasn't just about trying to turn the other cheek and get along with everybody, but understanding that we are a nation of the law and everyone has the right to participate in this democracy. But I do want to say there were a lot of other leaders in the civil rights movement, most of them silent. And even though Dr. King got a lot of credit, and maybe rightfully so, for the civil rights movement, there were a lot of patriots that helped start the civil rights movement, and none other than the great Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on a bus in Alabama. And that is something that sometimes goes by the wayside. And Dr. King was a great speaker, a great orator. He could speak among the crowds, where there was one-on-one or to the millions, and people listened. He was galvanizing in his vision for people, and that's something that we all appreciate. And that's one of the reasons we have the Big C Sports Show, where we can discuss sports and how sports will bring our society together. Also politics. You know, everything's about politics. It's all competitive. We even touch on Hollywood and a lot of the things that make our society run. Most importantly, people have the right to pursue their happiness in the land of the free, the home of the brave. Today's segment sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. I'd be remiss if I just didn't say some of the things that I think that I'm grateful for with Dr. King, is that in the climate that he was giving his speeches, in the climate that he was in, that he had to live in, there were a lot of people who told Dr. King, well, now it's too soon. We want to push for equality down the road. Let's wait another 20 years. We don't want to make people feel bad or ruffle anyone's feathers. Dr. King talked about the arc of justice being very broad, and the universal truth is we all want to be treated fair, no matter who you are. We all want the best for our families, but our society hasn't always treated everyone that way. And there are times, just to bring in what Colin Kaepernick has been through, there are times when you talk about inequality or an injustice, there are times when people want to make you the bad guy, and they want to try to change the story and say that it's something else. And it really wasn't. It's always, as Dr. King said, I have a dream, and he visualized things for the future. Well, we are all a part of that future, no matter who you are, no matter what your political beliefs are. You can't please everybody, and Dr. King surely could not please everyone. But one thing that he did do, without a doubt, is he let people know that if you believe in something, it's okay to stand up for it and shout it from the mountaintops and say what's right and say, at least say your piece. That's all you really have are your thoughts and your ability to communicate them. Doesn't matter how much money you have, whether you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter your gender. It doesn't matter where you were born, what country, your political, your religious affiliation. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you can speak your truth. And I think that's something that Dr. King stood for. And a lot of people all over the world have grown to respect what he was doing. However, at the time he was out speaking and at the time he was out marching, mainstream society didn't like it. In fact, they had to get beaten with billy clubs and water hose, fire hydrants sprayed on them. Water, a fire hydrant water hose is pretty strong, and a lot of people were sprayed by police department and law enforcement, and it just didn't make any sense, especially when you look at the universal truth. In the universe, everybody wants the same thing. The stars don't belong to anyone. All of us can have dreams. And what I love about the Big C Sports Show is we're not just about who won the game and what the score was. When I think about being an African American boy and growing up, listening to Dr. King and giving his speeches, and also understanding at that time in that political climate, there were times when even I myself had to face some things that were not very pleasant from mainstream society, whether it's being called the N-word or sometimes just people not wanting to give you a fair chance. Even though they may smile on your face, they knew the truth. Behind the back, they had the deck stacked against you, but he pushed forward anyway. And I appreciate the efforts and the fact that he could have been like the average person, could have said nothing. He could have said, well, I don't want to upset the apple cart. I don't want to make people not like me. And I don't want to make it tough on people who don't want to hear what I have to say. A lot like Kaepernick, he was ostracized too. And Dr. King galvanized so many great people. And the great Rosa Parks, by her taking that stand on the bus and deciding not to give up her seat because she worked all day and she was tired. Universally, she was right. Now, the law in the United States at the time, she was committing a crime because the people who wrote the laws that enforced segregation, they wanted nothing to do with integration. They wanted nothing to do with an integrated society. And I'm glad that she was able to deal with that with grace. And also, she did what Dr. King talked about. She had a universal truth that was important. So with all of the great things that Dr. King stood for, what do we stand for? We all have a moment in life where we can decide if we want to be the sycophants and just do the status quo and not stand up for women's rights, not stand up for rights for people of color. We're talking about, we're in a political climate now. When you look at Dr. King and how he wanted to bring our society together, America's a melting pot. But we have a political climate that wants to send people outside of the country who don't look European. And that's a shame, because the only ones who are accused of being illegal immigrants are the ones who come from darker skin complexion. There are people from all over the world that come to the United States. If you come through Canada, no one's checking you the way they check you if you come from Latin America. People don't even think about that. But it's aimed from our political system and the powers that be to still try to do what was happening that Dr. King fought against, and that's to end segregation. We're not born to be segregationists. We're not born to have bigotry in our system, but there are people who politically benefit from it. And we want to use sports as a platform to say that people can all get along, that people can all have the right to pursue happiness and liberty and all the great stuff that our founding fathers wanted us to have, even though they were not perfect. Many of them owned slaves. And even though they had the law, but the law did not benefit everybody. So no matter who you are, no matter where you stand, no matter whether you want to listen to sports and politics or not, if you're just ignorant, just turn it off. Just watch the game. But even the people playing the game, for the most part, black and white, they want a better future for their children, just like Dr. King did. He didn't just speak to black Americans. He spoke to the universe, the universal truth. And we all appreciate that. So I'm very grateful to celebrate this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday and appreciate the fact that he did so many things for society. And I hope that people don't forget, because it's easy to forget when someone's not alive, to say, well, that was back then and this is now. No, back in the day, some of the same vitriolic speech that was happening when Dr. King was marching, we've seen it in Charlottesville, Virginia. We've seen it down in Las Vegas. We've seen it all over this beautiful country of ours. Now, there's no one that has the perfect cure-all for everything, but there's a compass, a universal compass. It's a universal truth. If we can treat people the way we want to be treated, that's pretty easy to follow. That's an easy yellow brick road to follow. And when we look at sports now, we watch the NFC and the AFC divisional games, and we watch basketball and baseball, and we watch football, and we watch soccer. We watch all the great events that go on. There are people all over this planet that watch sports because it brings us together. It unites people. Whether you're in England, whether you're in Australia, if in the United States, Canada, South America, and Africa, all over this continent, everybody knows. In the African continent, they play more soccer there than anything else. But the thing about football that we just saw here in the United States of America, people can say America's pastime is baseball, but we see how we all galvanize around these games. They're just games with people who have their own lives outside of the uniform. And when Dr. King was marching, he spoke for everybody, not just black Americans. It surely wasn't just for men and women. And so I hope that the good nature of all of us, even if you disagree with someone politically, and our political times right now are very turbulent. People want to just talk at each other and not listen. We all can still agree that we want a better country for everybody. How we get there, just like getting through the civil rights vote and having the chance to have the right to vote, we will find a way to get there by people communicating. You know, whether you like each other or not, that is the way. So again, with the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I am so grateful that I was able to understand and even live some of what Dr. King talked about, and how if you want something, you got to stand for it. If you don't stand for it, then how do you expect to have it? And we all know that part of that means we have to stand up and tell people what we think is right or wrong. They don't always have to agree, but we got to do that. So again, I want to just say, on this beautiful holiday, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, I'm so grateful to have the Big C Sports Show, and grateful for being able to contribute our vision to the sports universe, what we think is real sports talk. And that means it is political. That means it is, sometimes funny, sometimes satire. Either way, I just appreciate the fact that we can do that on a day like today. I do want to say I'd also be remiss if I did not mention the passing of the late Keith Jackson, one of the greatest voices in the history of the universe. A man who called so many sporting events, did his thing for over 50 years. And I think about Keith Jackson, considered the voice of the Rose Bowl. Whenever growing up in California, that was always the game to watch, the granddaddy of them all, even though we have the Cotton Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, etc., and the Orange Bowl. But that belonged to the West Coast, down in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. And I remember Keith Jackson calling numerous Rose Bowl games. And I remember the one that I liked and hated the most was the USC-Texas game. I was a big USC fan, and they had a 34 or 35 game win streak, ranked number 1 in the country. And then here came Texas with Vince Young and Mac Brown and their great players. And that game to happen in the Rose Bowl, and to have Vince Young, who had just followed up with the Rose Bowl against Michigan the year before, over 400 total yards in offense, to do the same thing to USC, and then to have the Heisman Trophy winner Reggie Bush, and also Matt Leinart, those two guys in the backfield, and for them to lose to Texas in that game. It was Keith Jackson that called that game, and the way he did it, whoa, Nelly, he did that. That was his voice. And everyone has their stick, but there's something about Keith Jackson that every college kid, and perhaps even pro, can appreciate the fact that he knew that the pro game was better than the college game, but the college game had an emotion that was not tapped by the professional game until you get into the playoffs. There's something about the youth that get behind college, and it's just an amazing environment. So he called numerous Rose Bowls, really appreciated the fact that his voice was just so great in the way that he called football games. He's also someone that called basketball, and he called baseball games. Keith Jackson, actually, he called over 4 World Series. He called over 10 Olympics. Can you imagine 4 World Series? Keith Jackson, the great Keith Jackson, called them. I remember him interviewing Reggie Jackson after a World Series with the Yankees. He also talked to Mark Spitz after he dominated the Olympics. But to do 10 Olympics, that man was amazing. And I think about one of the other great things that I like about Keith Jackson. He was the first broadcaster to broadcast ABC Monday Night Football with the great Howard Cosell. And that was something that we all still appreciate today, watching Monday Night Football. Keith Jackson did that. He was a first American play-by-play man to call a sporting event in the former Soviet Union. Look at everything that's happening with Russia now. Keith Jackson called those events. He's the one, it was his voice that was on the line, and he's the one that made everyone want to watch the games. I remember going back to the Big Ten championship game. It was Ohio State and Michigan. It was Charles Woodson, and I believe he ran back a punt for a touchdown, and he did the Heisman Trophy pose, and Keith Jackson said something to the point of, hello touchdown and hello Heisman. And then he had the pose in the end zone there, so Charles Woodson did. And so he's called many of those great games, whether it's USC Texas or USC UCLA, called a number of those games. down in Pasadena and at the Coliseum. Just a man who had a command of what he wanted to do. No one can say he pleased everyone, because he didn't. There are people who didn't like sometimes that he was too folksy, but he was down to earth and he was real to himself, and that's one of the things that anyone can do. It doesn't matter if everyone likes you. You can't please everyone. But the man, again, from NASCAR, he called Evel Knievel some of his jumps that he had over, whether he's jumping over cars or jumping over other items with the motorcycle. That was Keith Jackson's voice. So whether it was football or basketball or boxing, Keith Jackson called boxing. And he did so many things that it's a dream job to have a broadcast business. And the fact that he did it, and he did it like the best of them for about 50 years, what a dream of life to go through life doing exactly what you love. It doesn't mean it was easy. Now, I know we're celebrating Dr. King's holiday, and even when you look at Keith Jackson had the chance to enter a business that was closed to a lot of people of color. A lot of African Americans could not pursue the broadcast business because, just like trying to get the right to vote, there was a time that people did not want to hear African Americans, so they would not give them the opportunity. And even with that, and I look at Big C Sports and how we got our start, you just got to make your opportunity, because Dr. King made it possible with a lot of other people. It wasn't just Dr. King, but he marched and gave his life in service of other people. And that opened up a lot of opportunities. When Lyndon Baines Johnson passed a voting rights bill and it gave us a chance to vote, then we got a chance to participate in the political system. And at that time, Keith Jackson was still doing his broadcast. So here's a man that treated everyone fair, as far as I know, black and white, men and women, all over the world. People will know that voice of the great Keith Jackson, and I appreciate being able to learn some things and admire his work over the years. And every now and then I think about when we're doing our show on Big C Sports, how it was Keith Jackson as one of the guys who I admired over the years. And just want to say on this great Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, it was Keith Jackson. Final point on Keith Jackson. It was Friday, a Friday show that we were talking about the sports world, Big C, and I just pulled up some footage on a Colorado Buffalo game, and they were playing the Miami Hurricanes up in Boulder, and Colorado had just lost a game to Stanford on the West Coast, and Keith Jackson, he was a broadcaster with Bob Griese in that game, and there was Ray Lewis, there was Cordell Stewart for Colorado, Ray Lewis from Miami, Warren Sapp from Miami, just in Westbrook, a receiver for Colorado, just a loads of talent, and Miami won a high-scoring game. But it was Keith Jackson that called that game. That game had a melee in it, and sometimes college kids do that. But that was Keith Jackson, and we just talked about it Friday. And then it was sad to hear the news over the weekend that he had passed. But again, for everyone in the game, in the broadcast business, those are things that you just have to say you appreciate. And I do appreciate learning whatever I could learn from Keith Jackson in the world of broadcast. We also had what a lot of people look forward to in the world of the NFL. I do want to say the sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. For every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports. Whether you're a pro team, a college team, a high school team, even your mom and pop soccer leagues, when you reach out to them, let them know Big C sent you. One thing I want to bring up: if you don't like the NFL and you saw the games over the weekend, of the games that were played, the major games, the 4 games, 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday, I can't tell you how I'm still hearing people talk about how excited they were, and it's still outside of their minds on the way Minnesota beat New Orleans in the last 10 seconds of the game when no one thought they had a chance. The Saints had just taken the lead about a minute to go in the game. And even though they took the lead, you even heard the broadcaster saying maybe they scored too soon. I think the great Troy Aikman was saying that. And sometimes you think a broadcaster is just saying that. But they know when your back's against the wall, you have to go for the score, and that's what the Vikings did. So a 29-24 win over New Orleans. It was Jacksonville with an improbable 45-42 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And no one expected that except for Jacksonville. They've beaten Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh, I believe, 5 out of 6 times now. And so that's just incredible. Coach Cowher's been through it. Tomlin's been through it. That's a team that has a great defense offensively. Not that impressed, but they put up 45 points on Pittsburgh. and just an incredible game, high-scoring game in New England on Saturday, 35 to 14 over Tennessee, actually 35-15, a game where Tennessee actually jumped out to a 7-point lead, but Tom Brady and Belichick and their system at New England, they find ways to win, and they showed how dominant they were in that game. And so congratulations to them. And also Philadelphia with an improbable 15-10 win over Atlanta, a game that Julio Jones, of all people, couldn't hold on to the pass that would have given Atlanta the lead. It slipped right through his hands, and whether he slipped down or whatever it was, if there's anyone you wanted to get the ball with the game on the line, it would be Julio Jones. And the fact that he did not catch the ball doesn't take away from his greatness, but it does add to the greatness of guys like Jerry Rice and how dominant Jerry Rice was, because those are passes that Jerry Rice would have caught. As we look at the game, just breaking down some of the game with Pittsburgh and Jacksonville, you think about how this game started out. Jacksonville got 3 scores before Pittsburgh got on the board. But I look at first downs, Pittsburgh 28, Jacksonville 22. If you look at total net yards, the Steelers 545 yards of total offense to Jacksonville 378. But when you have a interception and a fumble return for a touchdown, that makes a difference in the game. When we look at the rush yards, you look at the rushes, 18 for 83 for Pittsburgh, 35 for 164 for Jacksonville. Passing, if you look at Big Ben Roethlisberger, this man, an incredible quarterback, but just, I mean, you can't blame anyone. It was a great game. Roethlisberger, 37 of 58, 1 interception, 469 yards, the most yards thrown for in a losing effort in a playoff game. And then you look at the much maligned Blake Bortles, 14 of 26, no interceptions, 214 yards. In the receiving for Jacksonville, Yeldon, 3 catches, 57 yards. Lee, 3 for 28. Fournette, 2 for 10. Cole, 1 for 45. And they were the mainstays in their offense. I mean, I look at Pittsburgh. You look at McDonald, 10 for 112 yards. Bell had a great game, 9 for 88. An incredible catch on the touchdown for Antonio Brown, 7 catches, 132 yards. I still think he's the best receiver in the NFL. Rodgers, 5 catches, 42 yards. And Smith-Schuster, 3 for 5 yards. Not the best game. And on a 4th down play, a 4th and 1, when many people thought maybe a quarterback sneak, it was Juju Smith that the ball slipped right through his hands. It was pass interference, but it wasn't called. So congratulations to Jacksonville. That game was played in front of 64,524 fans in Pittsburgh. It's just an incredible place to watch a football game. We go to the next game that a lot of people thought was maybe a mismatch of a game, and maybe not even that exciting to watch, but it is playoff football. So, we will talk about it because you have to play the games. You can't just take for granted someone's going to win. Isn't that what Jacksonville said? In fact, I believe one of their players was saying he guaranteed to win. In fact, he said he's going to go down to the Super Bowl and they're going to win the SOB. And we'll have to see if that comes true or not. Just an incredible game. And looking at the Titans and the Patriots, what can you say about New England? New England, no matter who they are, 8 years in a row as AFC divisional playoff game, and going back to another Super Bowl, a 35-14 win over Tennessee, 65,878. Look at the number of first downs. That's the total dominance there. New England 31-15 in first downs. Total net yards 438 to 267 for New England. So they really dominated there in the game, and that's why they're hard to beat. When you look at the rush yards, 27 rushes, 101 yards for New England. Tennessee only rushed for 65 yards in a total game. Now, a glaring statistic that you may not think about, in penalties, New England penalized 4 times 37 yards. Tennessee, 10 times 62 yards. That makes a big difference when you double up a team in penalties. If we look at the passing, Mariota, 22 of 37, no picks but 254 yards. And Brady was 35 of 53, 337 yards. That's a lot of passes in a game. You wonder if he can do that and throw the ball as much against Jacksonville, because Jacksonville wants you to throw. The receivers that have to go against that secondary often have a tough night out, but we'll see if Brady can pick them apart. I don't know if anyone can. They're going to have to run the ball better against Jacksonville if they're going to have success. I'm sure they'll find a way to win. Who would go against Belichick? It would be an upset if they lose, But the more you throw the ball, the more Jacksonville can hang in the game. So that's something that the Patriots also have to be careful about too. That's just playing into their hands. They want you to throw it because their D-line is as good as anyone, and their secondary is legit. And Coughlin's really done a lot to help the Jacksonville Jaguars get on the winning track. We'll go to a game on the NFC. Everyone had the Atlanta Falcons going into Philadelphia winning. You have Matt Ryan, the league MVP last year. He went to the Super Bowl with the Falcons, and he's playing against, if you look at the Eagles, they didn't have Carson Wentz. Okay, they didn't have Carson Wentz because he got injured a while back. A couple of games in the season at the Rams when they were playing that game got injured. So Nick Foles is going to beat Matt Ryan, and a lot of people thought that wouldn't happen. But Nick Foles actually held his own. That game was played in front of 69,596 in Philadelphia. What a great crowd the Eagles have. Looking at the passing, Matt Ryan was 22 of 36, only 210 yards. I know the weather was cold, but you would expect him to at least outpass Foles. And Nick Foles, 23 of 30, 246 yards. That's not what you expect. You would always expect Ryan with his passing ability to get at least 300 yards passing, but that didn't happen. Look at the receiving. Julio Jones, 9 catches, 101 yards. If there's any receiver you wanted to get the ball to with a chance to win it at the end of the game, it would be Julio Jones. But the ball, it was thrown to him. I know it fallen down on the route, but it slipped through his hands. And the rest is said there. Philadelphia holds on to win with their tough defense. Just an incredible game. First down wise against the Eagles and the Falcons, 22-19 Philadelphia. Total net yards 333 for Philadelphia, 281 for Atlanta. You would expect more out of Atlanta with the way they played football over the years. And just want to bring up a point when I talk about Atlanta not scoring a lot of points. They went out to Los Angeles and got a good win against the Rams. But last year, the 2016 playoffs, the Falcons averaged 420 yards and 36 points a game. This year's team only 302 yards and 18 points a game. So when you look at that, that's a big drop-off in performance. And that's the reason the Falcons aren't moving on. This is not the same team they had last year. I think they dispelled the Super Bowl jinx where the losing team doesn't even make it back to the playoffs. But definitely that's a game that the Falcons had it right in their hands. And the Eagles, without the offensive explosion that they had to begin the season, they did get home field advantage in the NFC. But a game that everyone thought Atlanta would win. And in fact, they were going to win that game. But Julio Jones was not able to hold on to the ball. So they'll be watching the playoffs like everybody else. And that's the game that makes you feel like this is why we love football. If you look at the Vikings and the Saints, Drew Brees, who would go against Drew Brees in any quarterback duel outside of maybe a Tom Brady or a Roethlisberger? You would think that Drew Brees would have the upper hand on anyone. But if you look at Keenum in Minnesota, Drew Brees, 25 of 40. He threw 2 interceptions, 294 yards. The 2 picks cost him. If you look at Keenum, 25 of 40. He threw 1 pick, but 318 yards. Keenum outdueled Drew Brees, even though it was at Minnesota, with an incredible stadium, an incredible crowd, a crowd that makes you realize it's a great place for the Super Bowl, for as loud as those fans are. And if they get there, they'll have the home crowd advantage, of course, home field advantage. Over 66,612 in that stadium. And I'll look at some of the numbers. First downs, Minnesota 24, New Orleans 23. So they were even with that. When you look at the rush game, Minnesota only had 7 rushing first downs to New Orleans 5. When you look at passing first downs, New Orleans had 18 passing first downs to 12 for Minnesota. The difference in the game was just, it was like the miracle in Minneapolis. For everyone who saw Diggs come down with that pass, Stephon Diggs, and now Minnesota's gone on to the NFC Championship game. You think about this. Since 2015, the Vikings have held a lead of 10 or more points in 29 games. They are 29-0 in those games. And now, because of Diggs, most people, conventional wisdom was you catch the ball and you get out of bounds with maybe 2 or 3 seconds left to try to kick a long field goal. But when Keenum threw the ball, the defender fell down, and everyone knows that. And the thing I want to say about the young man is he made a mistake. You always want to grab the receiver. I think he was trying not to commit the penalty. They just had a timeout, New Orleans did, before the play. But you have to always make sure, and it's a learning moment for him. He's had a good year, but I'm sure he's going to have to put that out of his mind fast. But Diggs, what do you say about Diggs? Even the announcers were saying, get out of bounds, get out of bounds. But that's not what he did. He was kind of out of his mind. When he caught the ball, he was expecting to get hit. But when he saw the guy missed him and took out his own player, he raced down the sideline for the touchdown. And I don't think anyone in the sports universe thought that was going to happen. But just an incredible play by Stefon Diggs, and it makes you realize that the game is a game of inches, and it goes down to the wire. If you look at what's happening in the playoff race, you have, among the NFL's Final Four, the Patriots have 5 Super Bowl victories. Think about it, 5. If you look at the Jaguars, the Eagles, and the Vikings, they've combined for 0 victories. The Eagles have been to the Super Bowl they've been twice. They lost one to New England. They also lost to the Raiders back in the 80s. And the Vikings have been 4 times, and they've lost to the Dolphins, the Steelers, and they've also, the Dolphins and the Steelers, I think the Steelers beat them twice, and they also lost to the Raiders. So the Raiders Super Bowls are coming to pass, so hopefully they'll get back there again, especially Gruden getting the $100 million. But that's just an incredible game. When they're interviewing the players after the game, they still couldn't believe what had happened. And that's what makes football great. And on this great Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, we all appreciate sports, and we appreciate the great work that Dr. King did. We appreciate the great work that Keith Jackson did. And these playoffs are galvanizing communities. There's something about sports that will bring our society together. If you look at the Jaguars, they're 45 points on Sunday. It matched the most points surrendered by a Steelers team in their long and illustrious playoff history. 45 points. The only team to do that to the Steelers was Dan Marino back in the 1984 AFC Championship game, and they split it for 62 in the 1999 divisional round. And you think about it, that was Marino's last NFL game. This is something about this football factory. And I know a lot of people say with the CTE issues, and is football safe, and can our country rally around football? Can you find anyone that doesn't believe that they want to watch the NFC and AFC championship games? Football's here to stay. We just have to make it safer. And I just love the game. When you think about Jacksonville, they'll be making the 3rd appearance in the AFC championship game. The previous 2 came in Tom Coughlin, who was in his first year as the club's executive vice president with Jacksonville, and he was the head coach at that time. The Jacksonville's are one of 4 franchises to never reach the Super Bowl. They're just 1 win away, and you think about that. Only the Browns, the Lions, and Texas are in that group. So they're a team. No one's expecting Jacksonville to win, but no one expected Jacksonville to beat the Steelers. But they found a way because their defense is so good. So you can't really go against anyone. But I tell you what, when you look at Jacksonville and New England, they're 1-3 all-time in the postseason against the Patriots, including a loss in the '96 AFC Championship game at the old Foxborough Stadium. The last playoff game New England lost before the Bill Belichick era was a 25-10 defeat to the Jaguars in '98, a wild card round. So Coughlin was Jacksonville's coach, and Pete Carroll was the coach of New England at that time, and then he went back to USC and then won some national championships, and then to the Seattle Seahawks, where he also won a Super Bowl. And just a few more things to bring up about the game. There's something about a team that doesn't have anything to lose. If you look at Pittsburgh's Ben Roethlisberger, he became the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have 400 passing yards, 469 and 5 touchdown passes in a playoff game and lose. And you can't say it's anyone's fault because the game was so great. No matter who won, it was a game someone had to win. And I know a lot of people want to say that they want to blame the Steelers coaching staff, or they want to blame Tomlin, they want to blame Roethlisberger, they want to blame someone. At some point in time, you got to do what Jacksonville said. You got to earn it, and you got to give the teams credit for getting there. So that was a great game. Makes me really excited about watching the playoffs coming up. A few more things about postseason. Coach Belichick, he broke a tie with Hall of Famers Tom Landry and Don Shula by coaching in the 37th playoff game Saturday night. That's most in NFL history. Belichick also extended his own to 27 postseason victories. You win 27 postseason games in a row. We know he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but the fact that he's done it consistently and he doesn't have anyone to say that he's not earning it. He's done it with different players, pretty much the same quarterback, but every year, this team finds a way to get rid of people and bring people in. I know they're losing a couple of coaches, but Belichick, will he find a way? I'm sure he will. So congratulations to him, and I'm just impressed with him. At 40 years old, Tom Brady, he became the oldest quarterback to win a postseason game. 40 years and 163 days. That man is amazing. And Brady has 26 playoff wins. The only other remaining quarterback, Philadelphia, Nick Foles, and Minnesota's Case Keenum have combined for 4. Okay, 3 of those 4 came this year in these playoffs. That's how dominant Brady has been over the years. And you just think about Gronkowski has 10 touchdown grabs, 11 in the playoff games. New England has 12 sacks in the 2 games of the playoffs. Outside linebacker James Harrison has played in those games, and the Patriots averaged 2.5 before his arrival. That's how much of a difference he makes. So no matter what you are, no matter what team you're rooting for, we're all grateful for this great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and I appreciate everything that he stood for and making the world a better place. All of us have a chance to be a little bit of Dr. King. Whenever we're faced with some trials and tribulations, what do? How do we make things better? Well, you look at some of the great figures in our society, like our Dr. King, and you realize that he could have taken the easy road, but he didn't. And so no matter what you're thinking of that, I just appreciate the fact that Dr. King did a lot for all of America, all of society, and he's a universal figure. And Big C Sports will always pay homage to that, and we appreciate it very much, everything that the man stood for. And everybody who's trying to figure out what they can do, how we can all find that Dr. King within ourselves. We all know that everyone has the right and the opportunity to say if we want to make a difference in the world. And whether it's Colin Kaepernick's protest, and he was maligned just like Dr. King was maligned, I think in time it shows that Kaepernick was right. We do need equality. We do need everyone to have equal opportunity. Even in the criminal justice system, we got to fix that for men and women, especially for people of color. And so we hope that everybody in the future, when someone wants to bring attention to something, instead of shouting them down, maybe take the time to listen to them. I do want to just touch on briefly some of the NBA games tonight going on that have been played today. Charlotte at Detroit, Toronto at Philadelphia, Milwaukee at Washington, the New York Knicks at Brooklyn, San Antonio at Atlanta. And Atlanta's had a lot of success down there with the national championship, Alabama beating Georgia, and then the Falcons advancing in the playoffs and being knocked off by Philadelphia. So that's a game that Atlanta's looking for success in basketball. Miami's at Chicago, the Lakers at Memphis, Golden State at Cleveland in a great game tonight, and then Sacramento at Oklahoma City, Indiana at Utah, and Houston at the LA Clippers. And so there's some great things happening in the world of the NBA. I know that a lot of people all over the sports universe, we love paying homage to some of the young up-and-coming teams. We love the NBA, but just to run down a couple of the top 25 basketball teams. Number 1, Villanova, and 16-1. Number 2, West Virginia of all teams at 15-2. Number 3, Virginia, 16-1. Number 4, Michigan State, 16-3. Number 5, Purdue, 17-2. And number 6, Wichita State, 15-2, followed by Duke, number 7 at 15-2. Texas Tech is 15-2, as well as Oklahoma, 14-2, and rounding out the top 10 is Xavier at 16-3 at number 10. So no matter what spectrum you follow, whether it's football, basketball, or baseball, or politics, we hope to bring it to you with Big C Sports again on this great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and just want to give our thoughts and prayers to the Keith Jackson's family, one of the greatest broadcasters in the history of the sports universe. And for everyone that loves sports, we hope that you were able to follow some of his games and made you a little bit happier, just that you love the world of sports. So as we always tell you, as the late Drew Bondini Brown would always say, with all you've got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. And in the words of that, I do want to say that every Monday through Friday, from 5 to 6 p.m. on the Big C Sports Network, follow Big C Sports as we bring you everything we can in the world of sports, from politics to sports, and we'll do it every Monday through Friday. And we love the fact that Big C Sports is on the #1 network in the United States of America, and Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and the good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever any excuse for domestic violence. No man should ever put his hands on a woman. If you know any woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no woman should ever have to go through that garbage all on her own. And as we tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.